We're learning as a schus for Refuah Shlema for Ilan Chaya Bas Serach. We're on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, right near the bottom. We were in the middle of discussing the reasons for the Zara, for the Isser of eating cheese from Ovid Kechavim. So we had said one reason Mishum Nikor, because we're worried that the snake had injected venom into the milk that was being used, but there was a bunch of problems with that. We said from Chanina, because there's always some liquid left over, so that's either a problem of the milk, that it's milk of Avoda Zara, because it didn't get processed. As we know, as we said, non-kosher milk doesn't turn into cheese, but you could still have some of the non-kosher milk that stays on in the holes in the cheese, like the Swiss cheese. And or else it could mean that the nikor, the snake venom, stays in that. So now we're up to Shmuel. This is on the last wide line, 4 lines at the bottom. Because the way you make cheese is you take the rennet, the contents of one of the stomachs of a cow or of a calf, and you use that as the catalyst to cause the milk to curdle and become cheese. So worried that you didn't use the rennet, you didn't use the contents of that stomach, but use the stomach itself, the actual behemoth, and if a guy does it, it would be an animal that wasn't shechted properly, and therefore it's also. In fact, the Gemara, Keva Gufa Sharia, that's mashma, that the only problem is because we're worried that the Ovid Kechavim will use this kiva, the ar kiva, that'll use the stomach itself, or the maw itself. But the contents of that maw, that would be mutter. The Shmuel really hold like that. Vatanan, kivas ha'ovid kechavim. When we say kivas, that's a reference to the contents. If we say the ar kivas, that's a reference to the stomach itself. So kivas ha'ovid kechavim, the contents of the stomach of the animal, the ovid kechavim, that he's using v'shel nevela, as well as that of nevela harezu asura. They're both asur. The fact that Mishnah says them separately, it says both the kiva of the Ovid Kechavim, and then it also says shel nevela. Doesn't that mean that if it's from an Ovid Kechavim, it would also be a nevela? So, V'amar Shmuel chadiktani kiva shchitas Ovid Kechavim nevela asura. That it's a reference to what the Bryce is saying is that the contents of the stomach of a behemoth that was geshachtem ha'ovid kechavim is nevela and therefore asura. It's just an explanation. It's not two separate things from an ovid kechavim and a nevela. But in any case, he's saying the kiva, the contents of the stomach are asur. So why would Shmuel say it's because maybe he used the actual stomach of the behemoth, which is nevela? Kan koydem chazara, kan la'acha chazara. Gemara says this is part of this. We read the Mishnah yesterday, where we had said that Rabbi Yeshua had first said that the reason why gvina is aser is because it uses the keva, meaning the contents of the maw of a behemoth that's in a vela. And then the Mishnah had asked, the Mishnah had a whole discussion about that what about the keva of ha'oila, which is worse, and even that is considered, we said it's mutter, it's only asa b'derabbanan, so obviously it's separate from the actual animal. So Rabbi Yeshua was maskim, and he said, no, it's not. So it's not because of the keva of the nevela in the Mishnah, but rather it's because of the keva of ovid kechavim that was used for avodas kechavim. So you see, Rabbi Yeshua in the Mishnah had first thought that it was that kevas nevela is asura. I'm sorry, that the kevas nevela was asur. So that's why he said in that Mishnah, Shmuel said that it's going to be, that Bryce is going, that it's Asr. And later on he said it's not, that the Keva, meaning the contents of them, of the Nevela, is mutter. And that's so the Mishnah in Chulin, which we brought, that Shmuel was explaining, that was before Rabbi Yeshua was maskim, was mahader and retracted what he said, and our Mishnah is let's say and what we're saying over here that it's mutter is after the Chazar. Okay, so that's the end of that pshat. Now we're going to give a few more pshatim. Why Gavina of Ovid Kechavim, Gavina coming from a non-Jew is awesome. Ramalka Mishmeder Avoda Barava Mesha Machlikin B'Paneh B'Shumin Chazir. He says because they would smooth on it the fats of a chazir, of a pig. So that's clearly a major problem. No one wants to eat lard. Rav Chizda Amar Neshama Midin Oisa B'Chaimitz. He says because they would, instead of using this rennet, instead of using the contents of the maw of an animal to make the milk curdle, they would use vinegar, and that's how they made it into cheese. So, and chayvetz could be made from wine, and wine is obviously a problem from our Ovid Kechavim. Nachum bar Yitzchak Amam Nesham Midin Oisei B'Srafa Arla. He says because the Akam would use sap that came from a tree that was arla, and even a tree that belongs to an akum is aser if it's arla, and so using this sap would aser the cheese that was created with it. Come on, who is this like? Tana de Tanya. He says that using the sap of a tree of arla makes what the cheese that's created with it aser, because the sap is considered a peri of the tree, and the peris of the tree are aser because of arla. So tomorrow, no, it doesn't have to be bedaf according to Rabbi Afilu tem Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua is chaylik and says the sap of a tree does not of arla, does not aser. Ad kan like Rabbi Yeshua led Rabbi Lazar ala bekatva de guza. It's only talking about the sap, which is what we usually think about when we talk about sap. It's talking about the sap that comes from the bark or from the branches. Abba bekatva de peri mighty, but he would be masking if you use not the sap, but the actual sap, meaning what extrudes from the pears themselves. If like we're going to see, the figs have a liquid that oozes out of it, that would also be considered arla. That would be even Rebbe Lazar, who's chaylik on Yeshua about sack, he'll be maida on the extrusions from the peri. Behind the Tana, Yeshua shamati beferish. I heard, but specifically, shahamayim b'bisrafa olin b'safa eker mutter. If someone uses the sap that comes out of the leaves or comes out of the trunk, that's mutter. That everyone agrees is mutter. B'safa fagin aser. But what comes out of the figs, that's awesome. Neshu peri. Yeah. So that's because that's considered a peri and that's considered arla. So we don't. It's not so controversial.
So how do we buy fruits now from Goyim when we don't know if it's arla or not?
Well, arla is only in Eretz Yisrael, I think. No.
It's only in Eretz Yisrael?
I don't know.
I thought it's everywhere.
It could be that trees don't really produce fruit the first 3 years. A tree takes 3 years for a tree to grow to a decent size, but I don't know.
It probably depends on the type of fruit, I would imagine.
I never saw a hechsher on fruit.
No,
maybe it's not bisman hazeh, but I think it's outside of Eretz Yisrael. I don't think it's a problem outside. I think that's why we have to be careful of fruits that come. There's a lot of problems with fruits who come very soft. I think one of the problems is arla. I don't know. I could look it up. I'll try to remember afterwards to look at it.
Yes,
Sagt mal, Beinler of Chizda, Beinler of Nachman by Yitzchak. Titza Bahana. We had given two reasons, but the prior two reasons. One was because of we said Nachman Yitzchak Neshamid Noise Besrafa Arla. And we had also said Rav Chizda had said Neshamid Noise Bechaimitz, that you make the cheese by using chaimitz, which is yayin nesach, and he says because it's srafa arlo, arlo is also bahana. So why are we saying that gvina? We never suggest that gvina should be asa bahana. We just said it's asa ba'achila. But if it's chaimitz, if we're talking about yayin nesach, it should be asa bahana as well as if it's arlo, it should be asa bahana. Kasha. More says taka good kasha on these shitas. This was when Rabbi Yeshua wanted to distract Rabbi Shmuel from asking his questions about why Gvina is Aser. He said, "Tell me pshat in this pasuk." So that was the end of the pasuk of Tovim Deidecha Miyayin. We say L'reach Shemanecha Tovim. The smell, the fragrance of your oil is good. Lamat Talmud Chacham Daima. What is a Talmud Chacham similar to? Tzlucha Shel Pleiten, to a good smelling oil. Magula Reichanaydev. When it's open, its smell, its fragrance wafts out. Mechusa ein Reichanaydev. But when it's closed, its reich does not waft out. And this is a reference to a Talmud Chacham. Talmud Chacham, when he's open, when he teaches, then Rashi says his shame goes out. If he doesn't teach, then no one's ever going to know that he's a Talmud Chacham. And not only that, but he has other benefits. Those things that a Talmud Chacham, when he teaches others, those things that we are close to him, become open to him. Shenamar alamois ahevucha. Alamois, the taich of alamois ahevucha means that the young women will have love for you, will love you. Karibe alumais. So you should read instead. You'll be beloved by those that are secret. Alumais is a lashon of secret. So someone who is the reach shmanecha toivim, when a person becomes Talmud Chacham and teaches others, then the secrets will be revealed to him. The Malach Hamavis will also he'll be beloved by the Malach Hamavis, meaning that he won't die. Shenamar al alumais aivucha karibe al mavis. He's going to be above death. Talmud Chacham is zeicha ta'arichas yamim. He gets two worlds, the world of Olam Haza and the world of Olam Haba. Shenemar Olamis Karabe Olamis, two worlds. These are things. Until now, we were talking about wine and shemen, even though shemen wasn't really in this cloud, but these are the things that they're asur, but they're not asur with the Isser Hana. So the first one is chalav shechalvo Ovid Kechavim, milk that was milked by Ovid Kechavim, ve'ein Yisrael royeyu, chalav stam, prior to Rav Moshe, before Rav Moshe was mater from a large factory in America, chalav that was milked by a guy, it was asur, unless a yid was watching over. V'hapas, and the Gemara is going to say the reason why. V'hapas v'hashemen shalahen, pas, that was bread that was baked by an Ovid Kechavim, even if you know that like you can see, it's because of chasnas, we don't want to be close to Ovid Kechavim. This is not an isser, because we're worried about what they're going to do. V'hashemen shalahen, and their oil is also asur. Rabbi ubeisdini atiru Hashem, but Rabbi and his bezdin will matir the oil that comes from Ovid Kechavim. V'hashilkas, shilkas is cooked foods. This is the Isser of Bishalakum. Rashi says shilkas. No, it doesn't say. V'shilkas kol davar shebishlu Ovid Kechavim v'afilu beklitar v'kulu mishum chasnas. This is the Isser of Bishalakum. You're not allowed to eat from Bishalakum. It was cooked by Ovid Kechavim, even if you know that he used kosher things. Just that's why, right? That's why you have to have a yid turn on the oven for the guy to put it in. The kivshon is a pickled things. Rashi said lichvash dagam v'yark v'roish reglaim shal behema b'chaimitz, to preserve these things in these preserves that are made in vinegar, shedark and lasul seicha yayin v'chaimitz, because these are things that the goyim will put in it wine and vinegar, and then you have the yayin nesach problem of avodas that they use for avodas kechavim. And the Gemara is going to ask, if that's the case, why shouldn't it be Aser and Hana as well if we're worried about Yayin v'chaimitz of Avodah Zara, right? Yayin Nesach is Aser b'Hana. So why aren't these things that preserved, that we're scared that the guy is going to put in Yayin? Why aren't we worried about it? Utris trufa, chopped up fish. This is kosher fish that's chopped up, but the problem is if it's chopped up, you can't tell that it's only kosher fish. Maybe you mixed in some non-kosher fish. Utzir she'emba daga kilvis shetetes by. Tzir is like a fish soup that doesn't have this daga kilvis, a specific dag that's floating in it. So Rashi has a very complicated explanation of this. Tzir she'emba daga kilvis shetetes by. Shederach kalvas ligadol me'eleh b'tzir shel dagim tahirim. When you make a soup, a kosher fish soup, using kosher fish, there's a certain type of fish that grows in it, like a bug, or a little something that grows in that fish. It spontaneously grows in that soup. If there'll be any non-kosher fish in the soup, this kalvis won't grow in it. The kalvis itself is tamei. So what happens is, you have a kosher soup, a kosher fish soup, it will have the kalvas in it, and you'll take out the kalvas and eat the soup because you know the kalvas only grows in a kosher soup. If it was a non-kosher soup, it won't have the non-kosher fish inside of it. The other Rishonim are very surprised by Rashi's pshat because it seems bizarre that you only have a non-kosher fish that only grows in a kosher soup. But if it's a non-kosher soup, then the non-kosher fish doesn't grow in it. Yeah. Next. V'hachilak. A chilak is its own thing. A chilak is, we had before, the Gemara is going to explain, which when we saw that before in Rashi, which is a kind of small fish that doesn't, I said not small fish, when it's young, it doesn't have skins, it doesn't have the fins and the scales, so you can't tell. It doesn't look like it's bedafka a kosher fish, but so they would catch them, but you could recognize what it is. But the problem is they're very small, and there would be 1,000 of these little like sardine-like fish, and then mixed in them, you can have one real non-kosher fish, one fish that even when it grows up won't get the fins and scales. So therefore, it's also to eat it, a large quantity of these chiluk, because they might be mixed in a non-kosher fish. The kairit shel chiltis, a piece of chiltis, which is, what does Rashi say? Chiltis. It's a kind of shekairin lazla, and you would cut it with Rashi says you'd cut it with a knife, and it's also because there'd be some shemen on the knife, of non-kosher shemen. Umelech salkadunis, and a salt, so this salt from salkaduna, that they would also cut with a knife. All these things are asur, and there's no isur hana. Zaktamar. Chalav l'may nechash. What are we scared about if a person eats chalav that was milked by Avodah Zara? If you're worried about that he's gonna if you're worried that he's gonna mix in, he'll switch it with non-kosher milk, tarchi or tamei yari. There's a different color. Cow's milk is white. Any kosher milk is white. A non-kosher milk is like a yellowish color. V'imishum iruve. If you're worried that he'll mix in some of the non-kosher milk, nakum. Let's go take it. What about the person who makes it into cheese? He should give. We say that it's usher altogether. Let him take the non-kosher milk or the milk from from the Ovid Koichavim that he didn't see, and let him make it into cheese. The Amar chalav tar oimid, chalav tamei oimid. You should be allowed to at least make it into cheese because we know that non-kosher milk doesn't turn into cheese. Either kaboy legvina hachanam. Gemara says, oh yeah, if he wants to make it into cheese, he could. Hachamais kinan the kaboy leila michma lechamcha. He wants to make it into like a dip that they used to use milk for. No, it sounds like they didn't drink milk. They just used it for either a cheese or for a dip. So therefore, it's a problem that you're not going to be able to tell that it's he's not making it into cheese, and therefore you might worry that there's some non-kosher milk mixed into it. So why don't you just test it out, even if a person's not intending to make it into cheese? So it should be also because of the non-kosher milk mixed into it. Take it and take some of it and make it into cheese and see if it becomes cheese. So the Mar, no. Even the betar nami ikanis yuvi, since even when you make cheese from kosher milk, there's still going to be a little bit of liquid. There's the holes in the milk, in the cheese, that some of the whey, some of the leftover, what didn't curdle into cheese, collects in the inside the holes in the cheese. The loy kaimi, that it never becomes cheese. Lekala mekam Allah, the milsa. You can never be sure that that you can never be sure that that which curdled, maybe the part that curdled is the kosher milk, and what's left in the holes is the non-kosher milk that never curdled, that came from a camel. That part never curdled. So you're not going to be able to distinguish between the whey of the kosher cheese, or the kosher milk, and the non-kosher milk that just nothing ever happened to it. That's one problem with doing a test by making it into cheese. Even if he wants to use it for cheese, that means even if we say like we said originally that he's gonna make it into cheese, but there's still gonna be some non-kosher milk in between. He made the whole thing into gvina, but there's still going to be non-kosher milk in between that you're going to eat it. You're going to end up eating non-kosher milk.
So, I understand. To make cheese, it takes probably days. They didn't have refrigeration.
The milk's going to become spoiled. I don't know how long it takes to make cheese. You're saying what are they going to? I think that's why they didn't really drink kosher. They didn't drink milk. They made it into like a dip. A dip could last longer if you make it into something. If you mix cheese and you make it, and I don't know what they were doing with it, but they probably preserves it. Probably mixed it with vinegar or something. They always talk about this kutach, which is a kind of milchik dip, but you never talk about just drinking milk. You're probably right because it couldn't be preserved. You think about it, you wonder how it worked. Like you had people out on the farm milking their cows. Like the clock started running from the minute it was milked. It wasn't like you put it in a refrigerated truck, and it got there in 5 minutes. You had to take a horse and schlep it over.
As we know from Shalom Aleichem, that's what Bar Goyla did, right?
The ice box. Yeah. The milkman came in the morning.
Yeah, that's.
They had ice boxes then, didn't they? Didn't they have?
That's more recent. I can't imagine them having the ice boxes at the time of the Gemara.
Right. No, for sure not. Yeah. I guess they had some way of preserving it. Zok Gemara. Vahapas. Now moving on to the pas. We said pas also in the Mishnah has a din that it's asa b'achila mutabana. Arakanam Rav Yochanan pas lehutra bebezdin. Pas was not hutra bebezdin. In the Mishnah we had said that Rebbe Beis Dina hitiru hashemen. They allowed the oil, but the pas was not mutter. Sakam machal deikaman deshari. There was someone who did allow. For the fact they said pas was not hutra bebezdin, Vice dice from Rav Kahana and Rabbi Yochanan having to say that there was someone who did say pas was mutter, even pas from Rabbi Kachavim. So we're in the Chiyasar of Dimi Amar Pamachas Yatzer Rebbe Lasada. Rebbe went down to the field. Vehevi Rabbi Kachavim lefon of pas porni. He brought him a pas that was baked in a very large oven. Me'afa sa, that they baked a sa, which is a large amount of flour all at one time. Abba Rebbe, kamen noah pazu. Look how good this pas is. It came from Ovid Kechavim. Maro Chacham loiser. How could the Chacham aser such good pas? In fact, the Gemara, Maro Chacham mishum chasnas. What was Rebbe saying that how could you ask something? We worried that there's a good reason because we're worried that if people will eat their breads, they'll end up hanging around and end up marrying into marrying. Ela Maro Chacham loiser besada. Rebbe's question was, why did they aser it in the sada? Now, you understand in the city where there's a problem of chasnas, you go to take the bread, and there's all these people around, and there's goyim buying it and yidden buying it. So then there's a concern. But you were out in the field when it's only one person at a time, you're not going to end up hanging around with the goyim. Kasvur naham hit the Rebbe hapas. So people who heard this, the Rebbe said, this bread is so good. He found a good bakery, and he said, it's a shame that it's aser. They thought that he meant to say that it's mutter. V'lohi, Rebbe lahiter esapas. Rebbe was not matter the pas. Rabbi Yosef item Reb Shmuel Yehuda Amar loy kacha yamais. That's not what happened. Ela amru pamachas halach Rebbe lamalka machavara pas dochel l'talmidim. He went to a place he found there wasn't enough bread for the talmidim. They couldn't get what to eat. Amar ein kam palter. There's no baker around. They thought he meant to say that is there no baker of Ovid Kechavim that you can get pas for cheap from? He was only referencing a Jewish baker. He never meant to say that a Goyish baker is mutter. Now the Gemara goes into, it's very strange. The Gemara all of a sudden, we just said that Rebbe never was matter any of these things. But now we immediately switch to saying, restrictions and points about Rebbe's heter, Rebbe's heter of pas palter and pas pasada. So the Rishonim explain that even though Rebbe was not matter it, but as we're going to see later on, that Rebbe, that we're going to see later on, that when there's something is needed, it's a gzera that the people are not able to be oimed on, it could become bottle even without a bezdin that's gadol mechaveroi being mimahader, being chayzer on the gzera. Because since people thought that they were following Rebbe, there's two things you need. First of all, it has to be that they're not able to be chayzer on. Also has to be that people are not thinking that they're being chayzer on a gzera of a original bezin. In this case, since people thought that Rebbe was chayzer on it, therefore it was actually a self-fulfilling prophecy. Since anyway people thought that Rebbe had been chayzer, so therefore they were entitled, we were able to be chayzer on the gzera. We were able to be mevatel the original gzera. That's what the Rishonim say. But in any case, the Gemara now goes on as if Rebbe was matir. Amar of Chelvay, I feel lemad amar palter Ovid Kechavim. Ovid Kechavim le'amar el deleka palter Yisrael. That which we say that Rebbe was matir palter Ovid Kechavim, that's only when there is no palter of Yisrael. There's no Jewish baker. Avum the ikka palter Yisrael loy. But if there is a Jewish baker, then you have to use a Jewish baker. Even according to the mandamar that we're talking about, Goyish baker, Hanimi li besada, that's in the sada. I'll be ear like that, but in the ear you can't. Mishum chasnas, because you have the issue of chasnas. It's only in sada, not in the city. Evo hamanakas va'achal pas abe mitzri. Evu was eating pas that came from a Ovid Kechavim, and he was out by the border of the city. Amalu Rav v'yitem Rav Nachman Yitzchak lo tishu, lo tishu, lo tishtu. We shouldn't deal with the Evoi because he's being over on this Gzera and he's eating the. It must have been a place where, depending on the different shitas, either it was not of a palter, it was from someone who was selling it as an individual, which is not heter, and he was in the field, or he was eating it that it was close to the city, so it wasn't in the sada, where we said even a pas palter is also. It was something that he shouldn't have been eating. Okay, let's try to do another 5 minutes if you don't mind. Bash,
Yeah,
are you okay?
yeah, I have time. Yeah.
Okay. Vashemen shalhan, as well as the oil of Ovid Kechavim, we said is aser, and then Rebbe, we said, was chayzer on that. Rebbe was dina hitira shemen. Shemen Rav Amar Daniel Gazer Allah Shmuel Amar Zalifasan Shakel Tmeim Raisrasim. So Rav says is because of Daniel. Daniel made a gzera on Shemen, and it was a gzera l'chayra having to do with chasnus, and the other pshita is because we're worried about the kalim that are used to make the shemen. They're going to be tummy kalim, and that's going to aser it's going to make the shemen of it also tummy. What do we care if it's tummy? So we're worried that it became tummy from the avodas kecham. They're not so careful about tumah. So we're worried that we say that it's aser. Maybe it's someone who's not eating tyrus, so they could become tummy. It's not because of what comes out that's coming out of the kalim that's tame, but it's because of what it's aser. There's a tam that's coming out that's from their kalim that has some iser. There's a noisin tam from the kalim that's aser. Then maybe it's shemen of nevela, whatever the case may be. Amli Shmuel Rav Bishlam Lidaminas Lifasan Shal Kalam Asur Maisrasam Heinduchi Asur Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta Va'amar. That's Rav Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta said Dorish Rav Simloi ben Etzivin. Rav Simloi said in Etzivin Shemen Rav Yehuda Beis Dina Nimnu Alave Tirua. Rav Yehuda, which we're going to see is Rav Yehuda Hanasi, which was a Rav Yehuda Nasiya, which was a Amora, one of the Amoraim. They were matir. They got together and they were matir shemen. Kasav and Nois and Tam Gam mutter. They hold like the Tana. They paskin like the Tana. That the tam that comes out of the kalim, there's a machlekes tanoim whether Nois and Tam Gam, if a tam that comes out, but it's not adding to the taste, they hold it's mutter. And therefore, even though our Mishnah originally said it's aser, but the Amoraim were able to come later on and say it's mutter. Daniel Gazer, if Daniel was Gazer, although Daniel got they were because they were passing like the other mandama, the other Tana. But according to you that say Daniel was Gazer love, Daniel Gazer also Yehuda Hanasi Mavatale. Can Yehuda Hanasi come and be Mavatal it for tonight? Bezin Yachal Vatal Divrei Bezin Chaverel and King Gadol and Meni B'Chachim with Minyan. How can you come and say that we're being Mavatal the Gzer that Daniel made Mishum Chasnas? Amalei, so Rav said back to him, Simloi Luda Kamrit. You're telling Rav Simloi, who's from Luda, Shani Ludoi de Mazalzali. The Ludoi are well known that they are not respectful of Gzeres Chachamim. And Rav Simloi was not any different. So he said that he said that it was Rav Yehuda Nasi was Mavatal, but maybe it never happened. It's not true. They just Mavatal it themselves. Amalei Ashachle. He says, okay, you know what? You're saying Rav Simloi made it up. I'm going to go ask. I'll send a shliach to ask him. Ichsef. Rav was embarrassed because he really was just trying to push him off. Again, probably something to do with this, that we don't look into the reasons for Gzeres, because otherwise people are going to be mavatal it. But anyway, so he said he was embarrassed. He said because he knew Rav Simloi would corroborate the story. Amarav, imheim loy darshu anan loy darshinim. He says, but even if they were mavatal it and they were not aware, or they did not darshan that Daniel was the one who made the gzera, but we have a gzera. we know there's exer from the pasuk v'aksiv v'yasam Daniel ali, but Daniel accepted on his heart asher lo yizgol b'pas bag hamelech, that he's not going to make himself he's not gonna be matame himself with the bread of the king, with the king of Nebuchadnezzar, b'yayin mishta, and with the wine that they drank. It took about mishatyav, and he's not going to drink from the wine of his drinkings. It talks about two drinkings that he asked on himself. He said one, so one was yain, like it said, and the other one must have been shemen. So Daniel was makabel not to drink shemen. So Rav Savar Ali by Sam L'chol Yisrael Hayra. Rav says he accepted upon himself, and that was he made this as Gzeir on God's Klal. Shmuel Savar Ali by Sam L'chol Yisrael Hayra. But Shmuel, on the other hand, says he accepted on himself, but he didn't say anything to anyone else. It was just on himself, and that's why Shmuel has said that it came from it was Gzeir because of the taste of shemen, the tam shemen. That's why it was awesome. Okay, we're going to stop over here. I'll have to continue with this tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Have a good day, Shkayach.